Breaking news, I do not actually sell houses. I solve problems. In some case, multi-million dollar problems, thousands of dollar problems for people looking to acquire or sell real estate. So I'm going to explain why in today's video, so please stay tuned. I know you might be wondering, Shayla, don't you just open doors and like the magic happens and you cash a check? No, a lot of what I do as a real estate agent and a professional luxury agent here in the Sarasota market is I solve problems in advance or try to forecast problems. Problems, questions, things that are going to matter in a transaction, try to avoid pitfalls that can cost people thousands and thousands, if not millions of dollars in a real estate transaction. Don't forget, in Florida, we have a lot of snowbirds and absentee owners, people that come and vacation here at their properties. So much of what I do is in the lead up of trying to find the right property, lots and lots of research, lots and lots of elimination, kind of sifting through properties and deciphering what is the very best for the client. And then by the time they actually come and look or write a contract or write an offer on a property, a lot of that due diligence and work has been done. I mean, if they come here and they're like, why did we even pick these properties? They're on busy roads or at an intersection or a yellow line road. Like, why couldn't you have done the work in advance to help save time, money, and effort? That is what I do. These are time and money saving tasks that I do as an agent because I want to make your process, your experience in purchasing or selling real estate here in the Sunshine State, a very pleasant and seamless one, as seamless as humanly possible. And as an expert, I should be able to do that. I know my market very well. I know pricing very well, and I know how to save my clients time and money, which is very much, if I'm a client, I would appreciate. Basically, I'm a firefighter. You know, I put out fires before they start. I see a little ember, a little flicker of an issue, or I forecast one coming, and I try to get way ahead of it for my client before they even sense that there's a problem. So, of course, I have real life examples of what I'm talking about, how I solve problems, how I put out fires either before, during, or after they arise. So, zoning and property lines. I've got some examples that I've written out here, and they're all wildly different. And zoning and property lines, navigating complex coastal setbacks, multi-property variances, and easement surprises. Here's an example. I've got a property. It is a vacant lot on the beach side, and we have some questions about the seawall. You know, we had 100-year storms here, and it devastated our area, especially the islands and certain parts of each island. And with that came the removal of fill, the removal of wildlife, the removal of vegetation. And part of the issue with that is when you have a seawall, kind of, you know, an engineer comes in and creates the seawall, there might be open permits, there might be variances, and what are the differences? And how does that impact a closing? How would it maybe not impact a closing? I learned a lot in a recent transaction, and I'll tell you what, it's been a little stressful because I've been learning every single transaction I learn, but I'm going to tell you one thing is I get ahead of it before the client even has any stress to worry about these issues. I meet with engineers, I meet with attorneys, I push surveyors so that we can get answers, so that the bottom line is it doesn't cost my client money and it doesn't cost a potential delay in closing. Because when you ask for an extension of the closing or extension of due diligence period, you're leaving a little gap and a risk for not closing or for a client to lose escrow. That is usually a lot of money on the table. So getting ahead of that, getting in the car, meeting with people if I need to, pushing people along to make sure they do their jobs, they get paid, and we close is half the battle. Speaking of land deals, there are a lot of scammers out there when it comes to vacant land. they come out of the woodwork, especially if they sense or see an international foreign name on the deed, on the tax record. They are like come out of the woodwork. Okay. And so I know the questions to ask. I know how to point out a scammer. I know immediately when it is a scam. I just can sniff it a mile away. And like, what if someone's after your piece of land that you worked so hard for? And next thing you know, they're trying to take title and trying to take all this money and your name's involved. It's just like, it could be a big mess. So saving time, money, and effort when it comes to scammers. Here's another one. I know it's all y'all's favorites. Low appraisals. In the last few years, I've had some low appraisals. And this year was the first time I not only had a low appraisal, but the lending institution would not even lend on the low appraisal amount. They would only loan on a lesser amount because it was, quote, in a declining market. So understanding that now for future clients, that's one more feather in my hat to be able to advise. Even my preferred lender had no idea this was like the first time he had seen it as well. So appraisals when they come in low and how that affects the buyer and seller, because I have a lot of experience with this. This is basically how it goes. So you get a low, let's say it appraises for 900 and you're under contract for 950. Okay. What happens? Well, the buyer can walk away. The seller can agree to a lesser amount. The buyer can say, nope, I'm just going to go with the lesser amount, and the seller can agree or disagree, or the seller can just back out entirely. The buyer is not at risk for their escrow deposit, which in a lot of cases is about 5%. Generally speaking, we like 5%. That's just kind of in our Sarasota area, which is a healthy amount. Whether it's 900 or 200,000 or multi-millions, right? It's a lot for that buyer. Okay. It's all relative. So understanding what can happen and really guiding each client, whether I have the seller or I have the buyer, as to what is going to be in their best interest with a calm demeanor, because I'm the professional. I'm not emotional about it. I am very hypervigilant, hypersensitive to keeping your money, not losing any of your money, in tandem with an appraisal, a low appraisal, I should say. Being able to quickly leverage to a preferred lender can help your client save thousands as well. I can't tell you how many times my preferred lender has kind of come to the rescue. Brandon Terry, shout out to you, Edge Home Finance. He and his team are amazing. We recently closed a deal where there was some competition. There was another lender who had last minute brought forth a deal that was buying down the interest rate for the client. So my preferred lender, Brandon, and his team were able to match that deal and get him into an even better interest rate for purchasing the home. And in addition to that, we were able to get and I don't know what it's called. It's not an appraisal waiver, but it was like it wasn't a full appraisal. It was like a data report because the lender accepted the price as was on the purchase agreement because it was a strong contract. We put a lot down and the borrower had exceptional credit. Here's another recent example, seller financing deal. I've only done 3 seller finance deals in my career. And one of them was recently on Longboat Key. And I was able to explain with the help of AI, I'm not going to lie, I did go to AI to extrapolate the interest rate and the additional monies that the seller would have garnered over the time period. And it's a magical thing when the parties agree on something like that because it's not a common thing to see seller financing. I feel like in a changing market, it is more and more common when it's kind of an intermediate, like in between market. I don't know how to explain it. It's not a hop in buyer's market. It's not a hop in seller's market. It's kind of in between where when a property sits for a little bit of a period of time, the parties have to be creative. But my understanding of that and being able to sell it and being able to understand, not necessarily sell it, but explain how this would be a benefit to my client. Likewise, how we can make the buyer happy in this case, because I had the seller, make the buyer happy to where it just worked for all the parties. Again, solving problems, not letting a buyer go and then risking 6 months down the road that the property would sell for a lot less. So understanding the market, seeing where creative deals can be done can end up saving your client thousands of dollars. Here's another example of solving a problem. Only twice in my career have I ever had a client make an offer, lose the offer, time goes by, and then me saying, listen, I think this is the right deal for you. And then for that same buyer to come back and then the deal come together and close. That's just such a rare thing. The first time it happened was in Nokomis. Interesting, unique property. And they both were interesting, unique properties. So I don't know if this is like a common theme here, but we lost the buyer. The seller was divorcing. The buyer I could tell they just were, they were attached to it. You could just kind of feel it and tell that they were excited. They loved the property. They were sold on the area and everything like that. And because the sellers were going through divorce, it was kind of a messy situation on that end. We had to give them some time. And then I gave them, I think it was like a 2-week period or something thereabouts that it kind of dawned on me. I said, listen, I know this sounds crazy, but I do think that is our buyer. And very rarely to never, when you lose a buyer, do they ever come back. So I took a stab in the dark. I went and reached out to that buyer. And again, I'm always keeping in mind my sellers, if I'm representing the seller's bottom line, right? What is the most important is solving problems. And it might be a money problem. It might be just a simple moving of the property problem because of a messy divorce and all of those things. So there's a lot of intricate details and personalities and dynamics in a family that are going on that you're understanding and keeping that in the back of your head. So, I reached out to that agent again. Miraculously, I just felt like the timing was good. Like the parties had calmed down a little bit and I just felt like it was going to work, and it did. And then when it did, we had to deal with a low appraisal too. So it was like all these different factors, like the worst of the worst storm that you can imagine, all in one transaction. We made it work. We closed. And then the second one was a unique kind of sprawling property on the island of Venice. We tried to make an offer and the seller actually didn't want to pay my commission. It kind of came down to that. And I did not want my client, the buyer, to come out of pocket. She offered. I said no. Some time went by. I want to say it was like 2 months or maybe even 3 months. I don't remember if it was her or if it was me, but I think it was me. And I just said, listen, I think that's still the right property for you. Maybe the seller has come to their senses. Guess what? We reached out. They did. The agent was gracious enough. She said they learned their lesson. All this time had gone by. My buyer didn't pay any of my commission and we closed. It was a beautiful thing. And it's a rare thing. Sometimes it's just understanding your clients and the personality types involved, not just your client, but all the parties and all the moving parts to solve the problem. Here's another huge one: inspection issues and deal breakers. So first, where would you even start with that? First, understanding which contract you have. Is it the as-is contract or is it the regular Florida FAR bar contract? The as-is contract, it's not always as-is. Just so you know, I know it says as-is up there, but most contracts, most buyers on the as-is contract find something. I mean, after all, it's an inspector's job to find something, right? Whether it's the balance rods on the window, maybe mold, hopefully not. You name it, there's usually some things on there. Roof issue, because roof issues too, big problem if you can't get insurance. If you can't get insurance, you can't finalize the financing if there's financing. Even if you're cash and you can't get insurance, that's a problem. So figuring out which items to fight for, maybe get credits, what's fair to each side. And again, if it's my client, I'm fighting for every dollar, right? I'm also explaining to a seller that, okay, now we know that there are these issues, X, Y, and Z issues. You either deal with it now or you deal with it later. A seller, if they are now aware of issues, they do have to disclose those going forward. If this buyer falls through, or, the future one comes along, you have to disclose it or fix it anyway, right? So you have to address it. You cannot put your head in the sand as a seller. Likewise for a buyer, if they have to obtain insurance, right? Even cash buyers, they're not going to not have insurance, most likely, unless you're like a multi-million-dollar home that just doesn't fiscally make sense to even have insurance. You might self-insure, but those are some rare cases. Usually even those people have insurance. But so addressing problems that you feel like could arise, because if you're dealing with an older home and you've got the 4 points, right? The 4-point wind mitigation reports come out during inspections, you can kind of see the writing on the wall here, right? What if there's like a super old electrical panel? How does that work? Can you get insurance? So understanding when someone says you just open doors, it's not even close to just that. That's the easiest part of the whole process, right? There's 1,000 things that go on leading up to, before, during, and after. You're not paying for the 20 minutes it took to put the contract together. You're paying for the 20 plus years or whatever the agent's experience of going through and solving so many problems like this, foreseeing them come into play, and trying to resolve them at the pass, right? Before they actually become a stressful situation for your client. So I don't sell houses. I don't just open doors. I solve problems, right? So if you have a problem that you need solved when it comes to real estate, you call me. And my number is 941-544-7690.